Hi there, it's Paulie here with tea. So, you can have some too. As I said last week, I'm a huge fan of FASA's space combat rules. FASA, back in the day, were a fantastic company. They did some amazing things. I loved it. You know, they did Shadowrun. They did BattleTech. They did Crimson Skies, which is fantastic. And they did the Rebel Legion Universe games. Rebel Legion Universe games were an array of games had the same setting. They started off with a game called Interceptor, which was a game of space fighter combat, which just stunned us because it was totally different from every space fighter game that had ever been brought out before. It had its own feel to it. It was amazing. These armoured ships were taking damage that sort of graphically peeled their way through the armour. It was a vector movement system. There was a fantastic design system that went with it, so you could tinker around and make your own fighters for the setting. It was great. Then they made a wonderful ground combat system called Centurion, where you used the same design rules to design tanks. Obviously these rules had their own vehicles in them, but you could design your own, which was a big chunk of the fun. And it had the most wonderful system for combined arms. Essentially the ships and the tanks use shields, but the shields have got a flicker rate on them. If infantry are close to tanks, then they can play lasers on them and directly stream that information to larger weapons, and they can essentially ignore your shields because they're predicting the flicker rates. So if infantry get close, they basically spoof your shields, and then other tanks or artillery and so on can start firing rounds that can wipe you out. Artillery are really useful for scrubbing off infantry, and tanks are really brutal at wiping out artillery. So you had a balance of forces. You needed the three, and it meshed perfectly with the fighter rules because you could then do an air-ground battle where you could do strafing runs and specific ground attacks with aircraft, and have aircraft tangling up in the air to stop people doing that. Use the same design rules. Great. And then the next thing they did was Leviathan. Leviathan was the capital ship game. These were city-sized ships, immense, and these are used for subjugating planets and star systems. They are huge. The rules that they brought out had these wonderful ships that were big and they were ponderous. They moved slowly, you had to turn them, and they had this wonderful momentum as they turned. They felt slow and chunky, but they kind of felt magnificent as you moved them. As you send out huge clouds of missile fire, you send out entire fighter wings streaming out of these things, trying to, again, screw up the other guy's shields, peel weapons off him, or intercept the missile swarms, or intercept his incoming fighters. You had to start, playing with these larger assets, and it was an excellent game. The best large scale ship game I've seen, by which I mean big ships, not big numbers. You're only playing with 1 or 2 or 3 ships, and they were kind of grinding down slowly. They're immense. There's no sudden explosions in this. It was like these things are taking damage and turning their better sides to the enemy, and they had a great feel to it. So a new group has arrived, taking on themselves the name FASA, F-A-S-A, FASA if you're left-handed, which I am, and they have taken up the IP for Interceptor and Leviathan. So I got these because I'm a big fan of the originals, and I wanted to see, as like, hey, FASA's back, let's have a look at what they're doing. All right, so as I have said before, I try to find the good aspects of games, but I will tell you the bad ones. I'm going to start with the bad ones. But first off, here we go. It's a digest-sized book. I don't like the binding on these things because you can see it's very hard to open. You can hear it cracking. When I've actually tried opening these, I've busted the binding and pages have come out within an hour of trying to read them. This is a hex-based space combat system for capital ships. They don't quite have the giant city size feel that the original did. They've got lots of much smaller ships running around. They've got frigates, they've got destroyers. It's way more a sort of a generic capital ship system as opposed to the original Leviathan, which was honking great big city-sized ships with maybe a couple of lighter things around, but you know, the monster ships were the thing. As such, this is an entirely playable game, and we'll go over it, but the thing is, there is no continuity with these new products with the original at all. It does not share the same setting at all. It does not share the same mechanisms at all. At all. It's entirely its own thing, just kind of on a general theme. So if you were going to buy this because you said, hey, it's back, it ain't back. There was a company that was producing original Interceptor and Leviathan and Centurion. I did buy those when they were coming out, but that company has folded. I believe the guy running it shuffled off this mortal coil, and with the new FASA coming out, there might have been IP problems. But if you can find those, they are well worthwhile. They still hold up as in wonderful games. So what have you got? Well, this uses a dice pool system with D10s. You are rolling, trying to roll high. Usually a 7 or higher is the target number. If you roll 10s, you get to keep that dice and roll it again if it's an attack, not for just general stuff. This uses a very simple maneuver system. It's a vector movement thing. You have a velocity which can go up to about, usually up to about 8, which is sort of, you know, pushing up to some light. You have a set turn radius, so you have to go a set number of hexes in a row before your ship can turn. The radius is actually marked down in the ship. You have an acceleration number that can be used to increase or decrease your speed. That's all the maneuver that you're going to really be doing. You can spend some of your maneuver points on doing a side slip 1 hex across or 1 hex across and forward. You can do those, but yeah, it is ponderous maneuvering. Well, your giant ships. You launch clouds of fighters. They are more maneuverable and direct. They just have a speed and velocity. You move them out their velocity, and then they can essentially use their acceleration. They basically, they don't worry about turning or facing or anything. They just go wherever they damn well want within their speed and velocity requirements. The ships are pretty simple. Let's see if we can find them. There we go. They do have about 3 different entries on their ship sheets, I think, and that's going to be the next problem we discuss. But you do get these sheets which have, there we go, because they've given us some examples, and this is the only place we see these. One of the problems with the game. So it will give you facings of the ship. It'll have shield ratings for those different facings. It will have point defense, which is used for attacking fighters and for attacking missiles. Some ships just have 1 point defense. Very big ones sometimes have them on different arcs, so they might have one for the whole front arc and they might have one for the whole back arc of the ship. It'll be in there. These things are rated for, what do we got? Aether drives, yeah. Do they have target modules? Auxiliary drives, it's reactors. Does it have a lev drive, which means can this thing go into atmospheres? What its maneuver is, what its velocity is, etc. Very simple numbers, 1, 2 or 3. When a ship attacks, it's got firepower in set arcs. That is a dice pool that you roll. You roll that many dice. The opposing player is trying to block that, usually with shields. So they are rolling defensive dice. You subtract the defensive hits from the offensive hits. The remainder goes through as damage. There is a damage chart that you roll on. The damage chart will nibble systems away. They will nibble away the power generation. They will nibble away maneuvering thrusters. They'll damage weapons and so on. So you will take... these things will go forward. It's not like a slow death of 1,000 cuts. You are actually taking... damage. There's also on the damage chart, it's a d10 roll. When you roll a 10, it then goes over to a critical damage chart, which does way more hits within way more systems. So you can get sort of a cascade of extra damage. The ships have limited power generation. They've got a reactor power, and this has to be used for not only the maneuvering thrust, but it has to be used to power the weapon systems. Each weapon system on the thing will have written on it how much power it takes to activate and use that system. Sometimes they'll have 2 levels, like you can power it for this level, or you can warm up the extra guns for this level. But power management is the currency of the game. There's never enough power to run everything. There is an interesting mechanism called the captain's power, which is the captains have their own sheet, and this includes things like their morale, because how well does the captain run the ship, how much they like him, because damaged ships will essentially withdraw. For the more, there are advanced rules on damage control. So the captain's sheet also has damage control. That's how well he has trained his crews in damage control. And there is the captain's power, which is the captain's power reserve. That's his skill in knowing which systems can be powered down, which other things can essentially have power robbed from them to used for a more general pool of power for maneuver weapons and so forth. So this is a set budget he's got of like usually 1, 2 or 3 power. It's represented by tokens. He can spend them during a turn, and they do come back at the start of each turn as long as he's still got reactors running. So so you do have a little extra power budget depending on the captain's ability to finagle the system. There are missiles. Missiles fire in like direct streams. When they attack, point defense that covers the arc the attack's coming in through can fire to reduce the firepower of the missiles. So missiles do a lot of damage, but you can effectively lose a lot of the missiles before they strike the target. The other thing that attacks missiles are fighters. If they come within a small radius of fighters, the fighters may fire at them, and they too will whittle down the missiles. Having a little cloud of fighters out around you is obviously therefore useful for defense, because missiles do a ton of damage. Fighters are deployed either as little flights of 4, or they are deployed as entire squadrons of 12. And essentially, if you've got a whole squadron of 12 out there, all of their rolls are done with a major bonus, because there's a ton of fighters in it. They're way more survivable, but you might want to split them up into smaller clouds to give you a little bit of defense in a lot of areas, or try and attack the other guy with fighters. Fighters obviously can attack each other in dogfights, rolling attack versus defense, but they can also close on ships and get inside the shields and do damage, in which case the main weapons can't fire on them, only the point defense can fire at them, but the fighters can do damage to you, and again it'll whittle down systems and so on. So you might want fighters to keep the other guy's fighters off you, because they're irritating. And so look, a good game there, really. You've got quite large ships, which are relatively simply laid out. They've got pretty simple factors. They come in different sizes, which is the number of hexes that they occupy. Usually 1, 2, 3. I think there might even be a 4. What have we got here? 3 hex stand, 4 hex stand. There's a 4 hex ship. That's the number of hexes they operate. When a ship turns, it pivots from the rear, so it keeps the rear hex in place, and it will move the nose over. But there is a separate sort of turn it can do, which are ether turns. The ether turns, they sort of tap into the faster than light drives because these ships are so big, and you kind of like partly going to faster than light for a second. That allows you to throw the ship around a lot more. You can pivot the ship from any other hex that you want. So you could pivot it from the nose or from the middle if you're doing an ether turn, but the ether turns can strain the structure of the ship. You have to make a roll to see if you do yourself structural damage when you do it. It can be great for lining up on people. Some of these giant ships do have spinal weapons, so they have like a really limited fire arc straight down a line of hexes. You might want to use ether turns to line up on people like that. So you've got maneuver in there, you've got resources to manage, which is good. So it's a good game. It's well supported by a range of miniatures. But here's the rub. It's also unplayable without those miniatures, because in this book there is no list of any ships at all. There are no examples. There's all the information on ships comes on cards, which are sold only with the miniatures. So this set of rules, you cannot play the game if you purchase the rules. Period. Cannot be played. You can only play it if you've purchased their miniatures with their information cards in them. And those also come with captain cards. There's no rules in here for designing captains either. You have to pick ones that are obviously in amongst the sets. So rules as purchased, you cannot just play the game. I got on the Kickstarter of this, and they said, "Oh, you could have the book for about $60 or something, or it was about $300 to get a box set that had miniatures in it." So I said, "Oh, look, I've got plenty of ship miniatures, and I've got so many space hex maps that just give me the rules and I'll play it." You can't. Have to have the box set or have to buy the miniatures. There is no ship design system in here at all. You cannot design ships. You can only use the ships that they provide you. So there's no way of customizing it. There's no way of making your own vessels. You can just take what you're damn well given. So in that, again, there's a massive departure from the original Leviathan, where ship design was always at the core of the thing. There's ships in those old rules, but making ones that is your special design, because everyone feels invested now. I have designed the ultimate super ship. Oh yeah? Well, your opponent has designed the ultimate super ship. You're both tragically wrong, as you're about to find. What to say? So look, this is a perfectly workable game, but Mr. Snoots was very disappointed that it's unplayable as purchased, and there is no ship design system, so you cannot make your own ships. No kind of captain system for making your own captains, so you've got to use what they shell out to you, and there's no continuity with the original games at all. It's not from that world. It doesn't use those systems. It's its own thing. It does, it still uses 10-sided dice, whatever, but that's about it. With that said, look, I gather, because I haven't been able to play this, it reads like it will be a pretty good game. It still has a certain ponderousness of maneuver. With smaller ships more common, and they can obviously fling themselves around a little bit more, and the fighters are of course flocking around the place like moths. So okay, it's got a nice feel of like big ships at the heart and smaller stuff flinging itself around you. The ships whittle each other down. Protecting yourself from missiles and so on is going to need you to position fighters, and you can actually have specialized ships. There are some packages you can put in small ships and in fighters that are target transmission packs, basically, that are scanning the other thing and figuring out the gaps in their shields and so on. So you can bring these ships close to the other guy's Leviathans and start transmitting back to your own ships, which gives them a bonus when firing at those things. So basically, you want to try and clear out their electronic intelligence fighters and their electronic intelligence small ships. That's a nice bit of tactics. You can also have specialized ships. There are a couple of them that I gather when I was looking through the examples, that there are some ships that are essentially anti-aircraft cruisers. They are ones that are quite heavy on the point defense and so on, so you can keep those around larger assets and use them to intercept missiles as they're coming in towards your ships. So there are obviously some fleet tactics in this, which is clever. There's obviously force mix is obviously going to be a thing. Positioning fighters, deciding if you're going to attack the other guy's ships, if you're going to use them to fight against missiles, if you're going to fly very close cap about your own ships to intercept incoming fighters, what are you going to use your assets for? I quite like the crew morale rules. As your ships actually take damage and so on, the crew might just decide that they're going to withdraw. This bird's taken enough damage, we're taking her out of here. The fact that some ships will have, better or worse damage control teams and so on is a good idea. So this is a good workable fleet combat game, and I have to say that from what I gather, from what I can see through the examples and so on and the bits in here, it looks to me like this would probably be the best giant heavy spaceship, fleet level spaceship combat game that's out there at the minute. It seems to be, it's pretty simple to understand the mechanisms. They're not torturous. The maneuver is clear and simple. The damage is clear and simple, but there are obviously some good tactics involved with playing, with choice of forces, with positioning. So great, fantastic, lovely. My whining beef that it's got nothing to do with the original game, you can ignore that. As a game in itself, I actually like this. Interceptor, that I went over last week, I have to say I didn't like it because it was a very ordinary space combat game. This thing at least has a feel of big, heavy ships and a fleet. You're going to have your big battle wagon assets. You're going to have your carriers providing the fighter cover and fighter attack groups that you need. You're going to have your electronic intelligence vessels trying to spoof the other ships. You're going to have light vessels trying to chase those down. You're going to have anti-aircraft cruisers giving you cover. It's a good starship fleet level heavy ship game, and there's very few of those out. So look, it's obviously very well supported with miniatures. The photos in the rules make some look rather handsome. Like these look pretty good. But I don't know, because I don't actually have them. They're also expensive AF. If you are planning on buying it, don't take the offer to just buy the rules. Unplayable. You're going to have to get a boxed set that has miniatures in it, and even those are probably not going to have in them the really useful stuff like a lot of those smaller ships and so on that are designed for special purposes. For the ones designed for chewing up fighters or for screwing up people's shields. So you're going to have to buy. You're going to have to invest. You're going to have to want to actually play this. But as I said, it's a good game. As a standalone, it works really well. It doesn't tie into the Interceptor campaign system. The campaign system is fighters only. But, there's plenty of systems out there for figuring out campaigns for honking great starships. So anyway, look, I really wanted to fall in love with this, so don't mind me that I haven't. As its own game, it looks like it's probably perfectly splendid. I just wish it had been playable as purchased, and I wish it had some kind of link with the original, like just in the world setting, something to give it a continuity, because otherwise there's not much point using that name for the IP. But anyway, that's just my thoughts. Alright, my loves, I will hope to see you around a games table somewhere. Look after yourselves. Take great care of your personal safety, particularly for those of you who are in the USA at the moment, which is dissolving into a ravening nightmare. For the LGBTQ community out there, yeah, keep heart, keep together, keep track of where your friends are, and fight the bastards at every single level you can. Get active politically. You will only get the world you fight for. We can win this one. We're winning it here, but it's a hard fight. Someone's got to do it, and Mr. Snoots is in for the long haul. Much love. I hope to see you around a games table somewhere. Bye.